Hey, greetings there, everyone. It's GleeCon here again with yet another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we looked at starting off really getting into the Lands of Mystery, where we saw Bronzebeard's exploration through Ashenvale with a Dungeons and Dragons kind of flavor. And we are now going to continue getting closer and closer with the lore with one of the last chronicles we'll do before we start playing Classic. So stay a while and listen to the suffering of the Dark Irons. In Classic, originally, the first few months before any patches came out, endgame, or the most difficult content that was there at the end, was involving the Dark Iron Dwarves and Blackrock Spire. Or Blackrock Depths, at least, maybe. So we're going to read this all the way. There is multiple dungeons. Looking at what we have here. Well, Blackrock. Okay, so Blackrock Spire, Blackrock Depths. That whole dungeon leading up to and including the Molten Core. It was not part of the original set, but it was part of the day one release retail. So basically about half the dungeons that were included in retail were just slowly trickled out over the course of alpha and beta. And in the last batch, you got the Blackrock Spire dungeons. So when this game released and when we start playing Classic, this content will be this is sort of like our first signpost where we'll pause, collect ourselves, and check to see if there's any other lore going on before the second patch, which is when if you were playing back then 18 years ago, the first big content patch was when they did like Mysteries of Varadon. Alright, so let's see how these Dark Irons are suffering. More than 2 centuries ago, the sorcerer Thane of the Dark Iron Dwarf clan condemned his people to enslavement when he summoned Ragnaros the Fire Lord back to Azeroth. We read about that in older chronicles. The violent eruption killed many and formed a volcano that became known as Blackrock Mountain. The surviving Dark Irons carved out a stronghold in its depths called Shadowforge City. For generations, they were forced to serve Ragnaros and his lieutenants. Ragnaros, of course, being one of the first main in-game bosses, and Blackrock Depths and its wings being the last big mega dungeon leading up into Blackrock Spire. We also know that this Blackrock Mountain has a lot of flavor to it because there's the elemental aspect, there's the Shadow Council aspect, there's the orcs, the remaining orcs, Rend and Maim, that aspect. There's a lot. The Wildhammer and the Bronzebeard dwarf clans were unable to save their distant cousins, nor were they inclined to do so. The Dark Irons had earned their fate by launching a war of aggression against the other dwarves. Now they had to live with the consequences. Emperor Dagran Thaurissan, a descendant of the long-dead sorcerer Thane, now ruled the Dark Irons on behalf of the Fire Lord. A charismatic but hard leader, he bristled at his servitude, but delighted in the power Ragnaros had bestowed upon him. It's a double-edged sword there. When Ragnaros ordered Dagran to prepare the Dark Irons for a new war, the Emperor was overjoyed. He had long dreamed of conquering the other dwarf clans, not only to rule over them, but to wield their combined power in order to break free of the Fire Lord's control. His first act of aggression was kidnapping Princess Moira Bronzebeard, the daughter of Ironforge's king, Magni Bronzebeard. He had intended to use her as a hostage of last resort once the war began. He believed that Magni would do anything to protect his daughter's life and thus would never consider any assault on Blackrock Mountain that would put her in harm's way. Dagran was surprised to find that he fell in love with her. Moira had a sharp wit and a strong will, and she was not intimidated in the slightest by her predicament. The two dwarves began to speak at length about their hopes for the future. Moira was the rightful heir of Ironforge, yet her father had never believed that a woman could rule as well as a man. Dagran confided in her that he wanted to free his people from enslavement, and he was willing to do anything to achieve that. In a few short months, Moira and Dagran joined together in marriage, and I believe you can now see Moira in Ironforge. She might be the leader. If not, she's a big prominent figure. So it'll be nice to see how this evolves over time, because I don't think the game began with Moira as a leader. King Magni could hardly believe the rumors that his daughter had willingly married an enemy. He recruited a covert team of Alliance champions, us, to infiltrate the Dark Iron stronghold and rescue Moira. Here's a picture of Major Domo Executus lording over the Dark Iron dwarves in Blackrock Mountain. He's one of the bosses that you have to fight in that main dungeon. The Alliance team cut their way through Shadowforge City until they reached the Imperial seat. The ensuing battle shook the mountain, but in the end, Emperor Dagran Thalisin was slain. Much to the surprise of the Alliance infiltrators, Moira Bronzebeard was furious. She refused their offer of rescue and announced that she was pregnant with Dagran Thalisin's child. She had come to believe in Dagran's plan to free the Dark Irons. She intended to carry on his work without him. So that is essentially, spoiler alert, what a big chunk of the end game is finding all of that out. So we've just got the chronicles for basically everything that happens. We are going to be walking around, helping people all around us, and eventually we will hear about this big drama with the dwarves, and we will go save them. So this one is all done. Thank you for listening to another episode of Lore of Warcraft. This one's in the pipe, 5x5.